It's hard to know what to say sometimes. It's hard to know what to say to a friend who is crushed by sorrowful news. It's hard to know what to say to the onslaught of things we might comment on in our social media feeds, and whether to speak there at all. It's hard to know what to say when you're at the party with some friends and someone makes a joke that isn't a joke. It's hard to know what to say when you want to express how much you love the person sitting across the table from you, but that very vulnerability stills your tongue. It's hard to know what to say up here. It's hard to know what to say at the peace. Well, maybe that's not that hard. But I'd venture to guess that if we really thought about what it actually means to offer the deep peace of God to family and loose acquaintances alike, well, that conversation could get a little awkward too. Did you notice how much there was to say about what to say in the words of our scripture this morning? Maybe you didn't, so I'll refresh your memory. From Jeremiah, the word of the Lord came to me saying, "Then truly I do not know how to speak, and you shall speak whatever I command you." Then the Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth. "Now I have put my words into your mouth." From Paul to the Corinthians, "If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." Later, "As for tongues, they will cease. And when I was a child, I spoke like a child." And again from Luke's gospel, Jesus read from the book of Isaiah and began to say, "And all spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth." And then a few verses later, they turn on him. We'll get to that another Sunday, right, Sandy? Yeah. Okay. If we look more closely at the story from Jeremiah, we see a snippet of a conversation between God and this would-be prophet. God knows what to say, but we feel Jeremiah's anxiety and insecurity because he does not know what to say. It's hard for Jeremiah to figure out what to say. "Truly, I do not know how to speak, for I am only a boy." If you've ever been at a loss for words, if you've ever not known what to say, you've got a friend in Jeremiah. So we watch what happens then when Jeremiah says what so many of us find ourselves thinking: "I don't know what words to use." We watch as Jeremiah has to learn, perhaps similarly to what each of us has to learn. That is, how to speak. God responds to Jeremiah's honest confession that he doesn't know what to say or what to do. God answers with a reminder to put away fear and to remember that God is with Jeremiah and with us, in our words, and our actions, and that trust is how we learn to speak. It sounds really nice, but I wonder, do you believe that's true? As true for you as it was for Jeremiah? That true? When we hear from God, and it's probably worth stopping right there, right? That's a good question. Do we hear from God? Maybe not the direct call, the booming alto voice, but perhaps instead you have had a sense of something that you know in your bones you ought to do. That could be the call of God. So also the voice of a friend, passage from a novel, a bit of a song. God does indeed know what to say and has so many ways to say it if we would learn to listen. So then, when we do hear from God, what do we think? Do we say to ourselves, I can't do that? Like Jeremiah, I'm not old enough. Or maybe we think, I'm too old for that. I'm not ready yet. Or, oh, I've missed the moment. No one cares what I have to say. What if I'm wrong? Often when the moment comes for us to speak, we feel that all of our inadequacies are being revealed in that very moment, when really, God's adequacy is being revealed in that moment. We are asked to accept and to believe in God's adequacy. We are enough, have enough, can do enough, because God is enough. Like Jeremiah, we have to learn this lesson. Where do we learn this well? Here in church? In our schools and classrooms? At dinner parties? Over cups of coffee? Listening quietly to one of those really good podcasts on our own in our cars? Maybe there is a teacher, a mentor for you. Maybe, in the words of really old scripture, speaking in a new way to us. Like I said, God knows what to say and has so many ways to say it. Here's one that works for me. It's fair to say at the outset, though, that the poet Rainer Maria Rilke had a complicated relationship with God and religion. Still, God not being limited, this German-speaking poet from another century often speaks to me about God and shows me new things that I can believe in about God. Rilke writes, God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. I love how Rilke has God speaking to us as he makes us, just as Jeremiah said that God did for him, that before he was formed in the womb, God was whispering to him. And then, interestingly, Rilke describes God falling silent. And yet, don't be afraid, because God does not fall away in that silence, but rather walks with us out of the night. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. There is a twofold promise that I hear in these lines of poetry, echoing the promise of God revealed in so many ways for so long now. The first is that God speaks, though remember, it's not always Charlton Heston's voice. God does speak as God makes us. And I'd suggest that that wasn't only in the inky mystery before we came to be, but that we are all still being made by God daily, hourly. And so God is potentially still and always speaking to us. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. God might get quiet, but for God, silence does not mean abandonment. God speaks to each of us as he makes us and walks with us silently out of the night. God walks with us out of the night, out of every night, out of dark and confusing places when we've lost our way and lost our words. God's adequate presence is enough. Here's the whole poem. Listen, if you will, as Rilke mirrors, I think, the whole conversation between Jeremiah and God, almost like he was eavesdropping so long ago and is now telling us that same old story with new words. Listen, God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. It's hard to know what to say sometimes. Jeremiah, the prophet of ancient days, felt this too. Rilke, that strange poet, struggled to find the words. God said to Jeremiah, "Let me touch your lips." Rilke conveys God's invitation, "Give me your hand." You and I are not alone, and God is not at a loss for words. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night.